사절단 단크의 일원으로서 제가 한글에 대한 올바른 정보를 전달해 드릴게요. 한글은 조선 4대 왕인 세종대왕이 1443년에 창제한 글자예요. 한글은 자음과 모음으로 구성되어 있는데요. 자음은 입술, 이, 목구멍과 같이 발음 기관의 모양이나 그 움직임을 본떠 만들었고요. 모음은 하늘, 땅, 사람을 본떠 만들었답니다. 한글의 창제 원리와 사용법을 써놓은 훈민정음 해례본은 1962년 대한민국 국보로 지정되었고 1997년 유네스코 세계기록유산으로 등재되었습니다. 창적이고 과학적이며 아름다운 문자인 한글, 한국인의 위대한 문화유산입니다. 한국 바로 알리기, 여러분도 함께 해주세요.
자꾸 시끄럽게 우는 10번째 알람을 끄고서 몸을 일으켜 두 다리를 끌어 거울 앞에서 모습은 답이 없어. 어깨를 숙여 찬물로 날 씻어 피부를 문질러 불만을 다 잊어. 이제야 좀 살 것 같다 싶었는데 자꾸 누가 쳐다보네. 느슨하게 비친 내 얼굴. 왜 맘대로 안 될까 맘대로 못할까 맘대로 못 살까. 아예 맘대로 만들까 맘대로 믿을까. 어떤 날의 하루도 완벽한 적 없고 어떤 날의 하루도 이긴 적 없었네. 이겼던 우리의 상처를 잊을 순 없지만 짧은 손금에 새겨진
Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. U.S. President Donald Trump says Washington will launch an effort to guide stranded ships through the Strait of Hormuz starting Monday. This comes amid strained diplomatic efforts as Iran confirmed it has received the U.S. response to its 14-point peace proposal, after Trump called the plan unacceptable. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz sought to downplay tensions with Washington, saying the United States remains a key ally of Germany. His comments follow recent tensions with President Donald Trump over the Iran conflict and troop cuts. 7 countries in the OPEC Plus grouping of oil-producing countries, including Saudi Arabia and Russia, say they have agreed to a modest increase in production starting in June to stabilize global oil markets. U.S. President Donald Trump says he is launching Project Freedom on Monday to escort stranded commercial ships through the Strait of Hormuz. Meanwhile, diplomatic efforts remain deadlocked as both sides stand at odds over Tehran's 14-point proposal. Our Kim Do-yeon starts us off.
U.S. President Donald Trump has announced that a U.S.-led operation to escort commercial ships out of the Strait of Hormuz will begin Monday morning Middle East time through what the U.S. is calling Project Freedom. President Trump described the stranded vessels as merely neutral and innocent bystanders, framing the operation as a humanitarian gesture for crews running low on supplies. He said, if in any way this humanitarian process is interfered with, that interference will unfortunately have to be dealt with forcefully. The operation challenges Iran's strict limits on maritime traffic, enforced since the start of Operation Epic Fury. Ahead of Trump's post, Iranian officials were advancing legislation to formalize their control over the waterway.
Under the law that will be adopted, vessels belonging to the Zionist regime will under no circumstances be allowed to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Hostile countries headed by the United States will also not have the right of passage.
Amid the standoff at sea, diplomatic efforts remain strained. Iran's foreign ministry confirmed it received Washington's response to its 14-point peace proposal via Pakistan and will announce its official stance soon. The proposal demands the withdrawal of U.S. forces from near Iranian borders and an end to the U.S. naval blockade within 30 days, while explicitly ruling out nuclear negotiations. President Trump, however, has signaled he will reject the terms. Trump told Israeli media the proposal is unacceptable, writing in a separate post that he cannot imagine accepting the plan, as Tehran has not yet paid a big enough price for what they have done over the last 47 years. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
German Chancellor Friedrich Merz reaffirmed the United States as a key ally of Germany despite tensions with President Donald Trump over troop cuts and the Iran conflict. Meanwhile, leaders have gathered in Armenia for the 8th European Political Community Summit, where U.S.-Iran tensions and regional security dominate the agenda. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has sought to play down rising tensions with the United States, emphasizing that Washington remains central to the NATO alliance, despite recent disagreements with President Donald Trump. Speaking in a televised interview with public broadcaster ARD on Sunday, Merz described the U.S. as Germany's most important ally, acknowledging that policy differences are inevitable, but insisting they do not undermine the strength of the transatlantic partnership.
I have to accept that the American president holds a different view on these issues than we do, but that does not alter the fact that I remain convinced the Americans are important partners for us, the most important ones in the North Atlantic Alliance.
His remarks follow Washington's announcement of a troop drawdown in Germany, a move Merz downplayed as neither new nor a major concern. Despite ongoing disagreements over the Iran conflict, he reaffirmed his commitment to continued cooperation with Trump and pledged not to abandon efforts to maintain strong transatlantic ties. The comments come amid a sharp deterioration in relations between the two countries. Trump reacted angrily to Merz's earlier criticism of U.S. strategy in the Iran war, responding with plans to reduce U.S. troop levels in Germany and impose higher tariffs on European Union automobile imports. Meanwhile, global attention is shifting to Yerevan, where world leaders have begun arriving ahead of the 8th summit of the European political community. Held under the theme Building the Future, Unity and Stability in Europe, the meeting brings together leaders from nearly 50 countries, including all 27 European Union member states, at a time of significant geopolitical uncertainty. Key agenda items are expected to include the reduction of U.S. troops in Germany and the broader economic impact of the prolonged U.S.-Iran conflict. Launched in October 2022 following the outbreak of the Ukraine war, the EPC, often described as an EU plus Alpha forum, aims to strengthen political dialogue and cooperation across the European continent with participation at times from 44 countries. 이승재, Arirang News.
And now for a closer look at the conflict in the Middle East, we're joined today by Robert Lawrence, a professor of English and Turkic Studies at Donghae Women's University. Professor Lawrence, thanks for coming on today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So President Donald Trump says Washington will guide stranded ships through the Strait of Hormuz starting Monday. What do you make of the latest developments in the conflict?
All right, so the U.S. is framing this as a humanitarian gesture and a defensive mission to free ships that are stuck in the strait, not as an escort mission. And this comes right after the U.S. decided to reject Iran's latest 14-point proposal. So they're saying that this Project Freedom intends to free neutral ships that are victims of circumstances. There are about 20,000 sailors that have been stranded on ships for about 2 months. So I think what the U.S. is trying to do here is get some momentum going to break the impasse in the conflict. It's planting season right now, and the world has about 1 million metric tons of fertilizer that's stranded on ships in the region. So by framing this as a humanitarian gesture on behalf of the U.S., Middle Eastern countries, and in particular Iran, I think President Trump is probably trying to initiate some movement in the conflict and get all actors on board. Now, from an Iranian point of view, I don't think they're going to see this as a humanitarian gesture at all. The strait and the world's economy is their primary source of leverage. And this has been their strategy for a long time. So willingly giving up that leverage is counterintuitive. They've already said that any American interference with their new maritime regime on the strait will be considered a violation of the ceasefire. Donald Trump has said any interference with Project Freedom will be dealt with forcefully. So this is set to begin Monday morning, Gulf Standard Time. And, the stakes are high and the likelihood of a return to kinetic warfare is also high.
Right, and the United States also says it'll withdraw 5,000 troops from Germany in the next 6 to 12 months. And President Donald Trump also said he would probably consider pulling American troops out of Italy and Spain. How do you view the Trump administration using troop deployments as leverage with its allies?
We'll have to see if this actually pans out in anything first, and we need to see kind of the causes of the dispute to see how serious it might be. With Germany, this seems to be a direct response to some public criticism coming from Chancellor Merz. With Italy and Spain, it's a reaction to their perceived lack of support for Operation Epic Fury, with both countries denying U.S. access to air bases and even airspace a couple of times. So, legally, the 2026 National Defense Authorization Act requires a minimum of 76,000 troops in Europe. And there are approximately 80,000 troops right now. So by law, if he removes more than 4,000 or 5,000 troops, he's going to need to have space for them to relocate somewhere on the continent to avoid falling below the required minimum. Additionally, there's already some pushback coming from both sides of the aisle domestically in the U.S. You have ranking opposition members and chairmen of both the House and Senate Armed Services Committee. They've publicly criticized this potential troop reduction. And this morning, I think there have been some diplomatic communications coming from Germany that kind of they're implying, an attempt to reconcile the differences between the two. So We'll see if anything actually comes from it. As far as my view on this type of diplomacy, I think coercive engagements against allies is probably a bad idea, and everyone involved could do better by focusing on the bigger picture and maintaining strategic discipline.
And this has been actually raising concerns here in South Korea about a possible drawdown of U.S. forces in Korea. So given, these developments, what implications do they have for South Korea's security strategy and its reliance on the U.S. alliance?
Rhetoric like this is bound to make U.S. allies wonder, where their standing is with the U.S. And it's especially tangible here in Korea because of the centrality of the role that the U.S. plays in security here on the peninsula. So, but the thing is that it's a different situation here. Before I mentioned the NDAA has set troop minimums for Europe. Well, that same legislation sets a minimum troop level of 28,500 for Korea, and that's country specific. So these troops can't be moved around Asia, for example, like they can in Europe. So it's exponentially more difficult to unilaterally reduce troops here in Korea. But in order to prevent this, or reduce the possibility of this becoming a bigger issue, I think it's better that disagreements are handled privately and diplomatically, where communication is clear and one-line comments aren't rerouted and used as a wedge tactic against the alliance. The U.S.-ROC alliance is strong, it's institutionalized, and it's multifaceted. But in this time of social media, I think messaging in the information space is of the utmost importance, and people have to be careful in how they say what.
I see. And before I let you go, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth last week said North Korea's nuclear program offers a lesson to learn as he defended the U.S. operation against Iran. So how should we interpret that remark?
Well, he's arguing that the U.S. basically allowed the threat of conventional weapons to serve as a shield behind which the North developed its nuclear program. And now it's believed that North Korea has approximately 50 nuclear warheads, and it's very difficult to see how that would be reversed. There's some that hold on to the idea of denuclearization in the peninsula, but given what we've seen in Libya and the Ukraine, I would argue that it's fairly unlikely that the North will voluntarily give up such a powerful deterrent. So Secretary Hegseth is arguing that Iran is doing the same thing, and that's why the U.S. had to engage kinetically when it did. Iran's built a big missile program that can hold the region and, as we're seeing now, the world's economy hostage. And he's implying that for decades, it's continued to, involve itself in nuclear negotiations while simultaneously developing their own program in secret, just as the North did. So the lesson he's arguing that the U.S. must learn from the failure to prevent the North from getting a nuclear weapon is not to wait until it's too late. Not to wait until Iran having a nuclear weapon is a fait accompli.
I see. All right, Professor Lawrence, thank you so much for your time and insight today. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Saudi Arabia and Russia, along with 5 other OPEC Plus producers, have agreed to increase oil output quotas in a move aimed at reinforcing market stability. The countries will raise production by 188,000 barrels per day in June, signing a collective commitment to stabilizing global oil markets amid price pressure from the Middle East conflict. The decision was reached during an online meeting of key producers on Sunday, in their first meeting since the United Arab Emirates left the group. The group also emphasized a cautious and flexible approach moving forward, with plans to review market conditions and production compliance on a monthly basis starting next month. As conflict in the Middle East continues, a leading expert in Seoul says Korea needs to look beyond energy interests and form more strategic ties with Gulf countries for long-term security cooperation. Our Oh Soo-young sat down with them.
Korea should expand security cooperation with Gulf nations through middle power partnerships amid growing global uncertainty. That is the view of Choi Chang-un, a former presidential security trainer in the United Arab Emirates, who authored UAE From Desert to Mars and Sense of Security. He says the ongoing Middle East situation is fundamentally changing the region's security dynamics.
First, it has clearly shown that the Strait of Hormuz proved to be a vital choke point for the global economy. Second, by directly striking GCC nations, Iran has in fact drawn them into the conflict. Third, this war has demonstrated who stands as a friend and who stands as adversary. Taken together, these developments have made the regional security environment even more complex.
The shift is already being felt across the Gulf. Countries like the UAE, Saudi Arabia and Qatar have moved to strengthen air defense systems and diversify their security relations. Korea has already built one of its deepest partnerships in the region with the UAE, signing a $20 billion deal to build a Baraka nuclear power plant and exporting the Cheonggung air defense system to the Gulf country.
As this war has shown, South Korea and the UAE are highly complementary partners, each able to offset the other's weaknesses. This may also be the moment to develop Korea-UAE relations further into what might be described as a cognitive alliance.
At the same time, the crisis has brought into focus a longer-term concern over US security commitment. Washington remains engaged, but increasingly stretched from Europe to the Middle East to the Indo-Pacific.
Of course, there are inevitably concerns about US commitment to its allies. In that context, how does that really reshape the strategic considerations for countries like South Korea and the UAE?
GCC countries require a robust air defense system to protect their own infrastructure. This war has shown, under real combat conditions, the quality and effectiveness of Korean weapon systems. Looking ahead, I also believe that the cooperation in artificial intelligence, built on South Korea's strength in semiconductor manufacturing, could make a meaningful contribution to Korea-GCC partners over the next 100 years.
In a more fragmented security environment, Che says those partnerships are no longer secondary. He says Seoul must now move beyond energy ties and take on a larger strategic role in the Gulf region. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
A city in Gangwon-do province, which once faced the threat of extinction due to population decline and industrial stagnation, is finding a new path through urban regeneration. Our Cha Young-kyung tells us more.
Standing 59 meters high with a sweeping view of the sea, this is Dochebigol Sky Valley in Donghae City. Blue waves roll beneath the transparent glass floor. What was once deserted, Gloomy Valley has been reborn as a popular photo spot, drawing Gen Z and millennials from across the country. Since its opening in 2021, the number of cumulative visitors has surpassed 2 million.
This place is trendy on social media right now, so I came to take pictures. I love that it's right in front of the ocean.
An abandoned mine, where limestone was extracted for nearly 50 years, has been transformed into a tourist attraction featuring a jade green lake, attracting hundreds of thousands of visitors annually. The Dongho-dong area, once a hub for printing and publishing, has been reborn as a seaside bookstore village. With the opening of the Pencil Museum and various book cafes, vitality is returning to the once fading downtown area. Nearby commercial districts are also seeing a revival.
The number of customers has definitely increased by more than 50%.
Living conditions in the underdeveloped Old Town have also significantly improved. Old vacant houses, for instance, have been renovated into one-month stay residences. Witnessing this success, officials from other regions facing similar threats of extinction are visiting to learn from Donghae's sample. Since its population dipped below 100,000 in 2005 and fell further to around 80,000, all eyes are now on whether Donghae's urban regeneration can go beyond a temporary boom to become a permanent solution for attracting new residents. Cha Young-kyung, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. 3 people have died and at least 3 others have fallen ill after a hantavirus outbreak on a cruise ship sailing in the Atlantic Ocean. The World Health Organization said on Sunday that at least 1 case has been confirmed by laboratory tests. 1 patient is in intensive care in a South African hospital. Hantavirus has no specific treatment or cure. It spreads through contact with infected rodent droppings and can lead to severe respiratory illness. Israel has committed to a major deal to buy 2 new squadrons of advanced fighter jets from American defense contractors Lockheed Martin and Boeing. The $119 billion acquisition approved on Sunday covers a 4th F-35 squadron and a 2nd batch of F-15IA jets. Officials said the 2-month conflict with Iran made it clear that maintaining a technological edge in the air was not optional. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said, quote, "Israel is stronger than ever, and Israel must always be much stronger than our enemies." In the U.S., Spirit Airlines shut down all operations on Saturday. It becomes the first airline to collapse as a direct consequence of the Iran war after jet fuel costs doubled in 2 months. Spirit had planned around fuel costs of around $2.20 a gallon, but by the end of April, those costs had reached $4.50, making survival without fresh financing impossible. The Trump administration offered $500 million to keep the carrier alive in exchange for a 90% equity stake, but creditors rejected the deal. Spirit accounted for roughly 5% of all U.S. domestic flights at its peak. All flights have been canceled, with most customers refunded on Saturday. In India, a temple elephant broke free of its chains on Friday and went on a 2-hour rampage, killing 1 man, injuring others, and flipping a car using its tusks. The victim had driven the elephant to the Kidanguru Mahabhishnu temple in the southern Indian state of Kerala for a religious celebration. He was trampled after stopping to photograph an injury on the animal's tusk. The elephant remained beside his body for an extended period, preventing anyone from approaching. Police, wildlife officials, and an elephant squad eventually subdued the animal with tranquilizer darts.
Unlike yesterday's cloudy and chilly conditions, today we'll see a return to pleasant spring weather. There are still a few lingering showers this morning, mainly across Gangwon-do and Gyeongsang-Bukdo provinces. Meanwhile, higher elevation of Gangwon-do province could see snow instead of some rainfall. Meanwhile, plenty of sunshine will boost UV levels to very high levels today. Don't forget your sunblock and sunglasses, especially if you're in the southern parts of Korea today. Children's Day tomorrow will also bring clear skies and even warmer conditions, but mornings will continue to stay chilly, so make sure to take the weather into account and do dress accordingly. Many are coming down a cold these days. Afternoon highs will be nearly 5 degrees higher than yesterday, and most major cities will see highs around 20 degrees Celsius. For a closer look, Seoul and Daegu will be topping out at 20 degrees Celsius, but Gwangju will be breezier at 18 degrees. Meanwhile, air quality will be normal to good nationwide all day today. And through the rest of the week, skies will stay mostly clear under high pressure, with continued large temperature differences between morning and afternoon. But overall, we are expecting some fine weather to spend some time outdoors.
Now that's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.
Are you curious about Korean cultural heritage?
If you are a fan of Korean culture and history, listen up. Korean cultural heritage is based on a 5,000-year history.
The whole country is like a massive museum because it possesses such diverse cultural properties. Let's not wait any longer and take a look.
First, for beginners. For those who are not familiar with Korea, let's start with the world-famous list.
You can see how Korea's beautiful traditional patterns and historical features have been preserved.
And don't forget to experience Korea's intangible cultural heritage. From Gangang-sul래 to Talchum, there's just so many exciting cultural heritages to experience.
These are for intermediate level tourists who have already visited Korea and its famous attractions. You might even be standing in a World Heritage Site right now.
How about searching for intangible cultural heritage that you can experience? 한소리, 제주 해녀 diving, 김장. Make some unforgettable memories while having fun.
Last but not least, the advanced level. It's the memory of the World Register. Korea possesses an extensive documentary heritage. Korea is serious about documentation and preservation.
A tour of Korean cultural heritage will become a legacy of your own.
Why not make your own Korean cultural heritage travel itinerary?
Isn't it fascinating?
We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day. We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Monday, May 4th here in Seoul. I'm Isujin, and this is News Generation. Joining us today is Q.
Thank you for having me.
For coming in. Also, Key's with us.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. And both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So as we kick off a brand new work week, there's something special just around the corner. So tomorrow marks a big day for children and families across the country because it's Children's Day here in Korea, celebrated every year on May 5th. So it's a day dedicated to celebrating childhood with families heading out to make lasting memories. So how is Children's Day typically celebrated right here in Korea, Ki-eun?
Before I answer your question, it's a pity that I don't fall under the children's category nor the parents category for now. I'm kind of in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, with you as well. But this day is all about children and parents devoting this particular day in May to make their kids feel very special, appreciated, and happy. It is one of the most joyful, family-centered holidays of the year as kids are extremely excited because parents pre-plan big events catered just for them. And for me, I remember growing up in Australia, celebrating Children's Day. I actually went to church, and churches would prepare a big event for all the kids. So one church leader would take all the kids to the cinemas and watch like big animation movies that would always be released right before Children's Day. So that all the kids
come out around
exactly. So that everyone would want to watch it, and then sometimes we'll go to like amusement parks as well. So I have very good memories from the past, but. Ever since keep becoming old, not really celebrating Children's Day, I had to look forward to Parents' Day more and to treat my parents to good dinner growing up. So I want to go back to being a child.
I feel that very much. So you actually you're actually a relevant, very important person on this day. So what do families usually do on Children's Day here in Korea?
First of all, I want to adapt Ki-eun as my son so that I can be treated well. Tomorrow is a very critical day for me, and it's disastrous. It's always a war to get the right timing with the toys and everything. But we take kids normally somewhere special. Depending on kids' age, we take them to, like Ki-eun said, we go to amusement park, or if they're a bit younger, then we take them to what we call Kids Cafe. It's a children's playground, basically. Then we eat kids' favorite, not necessarily healthy, but things like pizza, chicken, hamburgers, or Chinese food, what kids like. And most importantly, we have to stop by at the toy store to get them favorite toy. Unfortunately, past several years, I've been working on Children's Day. But what I normally do, I bring my kids to my workplace, because normally anything I do is related to Children's Day. So it's like a family month day thing. So I bring him in, and we just play together. And I buy him a nice toy at the end of the day. Then he's all happy.
You sound like the best dad,
Yeah, trying to be.
I wish I had a dad like you.
Maybe this one worked out, you adopting you. So every week, we take a closer look at a global issue and put it up for debate. And what better topic to talk about today than fast passes? And they have been drawing growing attention, especially around peak seasons like Children's Day. So what started as a convenience feature is now sparking a broader conversation about fairness as well as access. So what exactly is a fast pass called Fast Track Pass here in Korea, and why is it so controversial?
So a fast track is a separate queue that only those who have purchased a special ticket that costs much more than the usual regular tickets can use to wait for rides. By paying a higher price, they can enjoy the rides more quickly without having to line up like the rest. Similar products are sold not only in major amusement parks in Korea, but also in many countries around the world, including the United States, Japan, and even France. However, since amusement parks are considered spaces mainly for children, there are ongoing negative opinions about this system, and the debate over pros and cons remains heated, which we'll talk about today, whether it's okay, whether it's right to have these kind of fast track passes available or sold in amusement parks where they're majority of them are kids, and you don't want them to feel kind of like left out and seeing other kids cut in line just because they paid more. It's hard for kids to really understand this concept. And even as parents, it's not something you want your kids to kind of be revealed to, comparing to other people who are considered more wealthy.
Exactly. And I actually know a parent who's actually debating about this right this moment.
Really? Okay.
He's going to Japan in May for Children's Day. He's debating how many passes he needs to get. So that is also...
So he's working hard, saving up more money.
Because they're so expensive too. So while it clearly offers convenience and efficiency, it also raises important questions about who gets priority and at what cost. And with that in mind, so let's break down the opposing view. So is paying for faster access economically fair, Key, in your opinion? As a kid too.
That's exactly why I'm sitting down right here at this very building, working hard to save up some more money. I don't see a huge problem here if there's a right balance. Looking at your favorite singer's concert, of course, then, for example, you go closer to the stage, obviously, it's more expensive, right? So paying more for better services, I think it's just a natural thing. Even some experts and scholars in economics also point out that buying time with money happens all the time in economics. Personally, I used Fast Track Osaka last year when I took a trip with my mom the other day, and when I had to book a restaurant, there's an app where the list of restaurants, normally high-end restaurants or very popular restaurants, can be reserved with a bit of extra money. Honestly, it was super convenient, efficient, and it was worth it.
So that perspective highlights how this system fits within a broader market logic where paying more for better service is should be widely accepted. But when the setting shifts to a space designed for children, the conversation can take a different turn. So what are your thoughts on this, Keelan?
Even though there may be no issue from an economic perspective, like you said, the situation shifts a lot depending on where you go, because amusement parks, like I said, is mainly for children, and it's meant for children, meaning that they're not yet familiar with the business side of amusement parks, because most amusement parks are privately owned, and how much profit it actually brings by selling these fast-track tickets. Now, adults usually teach children the importance of waiting their turn, being fair, but this system can be seen as suggesting that it's acceptable to cut in line if you pay more money, going against that belief, and in a sense, showing that money can kind of solve everything. Additionally, for families with limited financial means, there is a possibility that the children may feel a sense of relative deprivation, something both the parents, especially the parents, and the kids don't want to feel. Kids are, I guess, too young to take this as a source of motivation and use this as something to become more competitive, so that when they grow up, they'll be financially capable to purchase a free pass, for their kids as well in the future. But given the nature of the place, it would be ideal if as many children as possible could enjoy the rides in a fair, joyful way, even if it means waiting in line in a fair manner. Because, when you're young, you can't, it's good to teach children to, wait your turn. It's good to be fair, but if they see those things at a young age, we are already living in a very tough world. But it is, it does make sense from the business standpoint. But as kids growing up, I guess exposing them to these kind of things later could be the better option.
I guess it's probably hard for some parents to explain why their kids might not be getting the fast passes.
It's quite sad as well.
It is. As someone who has never actually used a fast pass before, I can maybe relate to that a bit.
Me too.
So it raises a deeper question about values, whether convenience should come before fairness, especially in spaces meant to be shared equally. And that tension between efficiency and equality is also what keeps this debate ongoing. So we also want to hear directly from our viewers. So we ran a poll on the Arirang News YouTube channel asking, and here's what the results showed on this. So a clear majority of respondents, 69%, said they support the system or find it reasonable, while 31% say that they oppose it. So the results suggest that while concerns over fairness clearly exist, many people are ultimately willing to accept fast-track passes as a practical and efficient option, especially in situations where time is limited. So what began in amusement parks is now expanding into other parts of everyday life. So where else are fast pass systems starting to appear, Key?
Sure. So in Japan, the fast pass system has been introduced in popular restaurants, allowing customers to skip the line, of course, and enter it right away. It's currently available at around 80 restaurants in cities like Tokyo and Osaka. The one that I used is a similar service, not exactly the same, but there are other apps that offer the same services. And prices vary depending on the crowd levels, weather, and time. And in some cases, it can go up to 6 times the regular cost, meaning you have to pay pretty much 5 times more than what you're supposed to pay at the restaurant.
So now even dining, something we see as a basic shared experience, is being reshaped by this idea of paying for priority. And just like in theme parks, this shift is also drawing mixed attention. So is this smart business or just profit-driven unfairness in your opinion, Kim?
It really depends where you stand on this idea, but as a consumer myself, it feels a little uncomfortable that businesses seem to be pursuing profit too aggressively. These days, there are many convenient systems, like applications, where you don't have to physically line up, be in queue, and you're instead actually called, or even you receive a message when it's your turn. Of course, you need to arrive in a few minutes to be served a table. However, instead of adopting such systems, the restaurants that Ki just mentioned in Japan, they've introduced one you have kind of no choice but to pay extra, which creates a negative impression when it comes to having a single meal at a restaurant. Now, it also gives a sense of privilege for the wealthy, which does exist in today's world and is applied in many areas. I do agree with that. But to do so at a popular restaurant, it doesn't seem, I guess, customer-friendly to the general public. At least that's what I think. And maybe some other people might have the same feelings as me.
Mm-hmm. And that concern reflects a growing discomfort with turning everyday experiences into services based on how much you pay. So at the same time, others argue the context matters, especially for certain groups. So could this actually benefit some time-strapped tourists, Ki?
Sure, after hearing what Kyun says, I feel like I'm becoming a greedy CEO. But interestingly enough, 90% of the users for some restaurants in Japan are actually foreign tourists, and about 70% of those users are from their 20s and 30s. So for travelers with limited time, this can be a very efficient option. Like when I took my mom there, waiting for 2 hours in such a hot weather could be harsh for my mom, but when I used the application, it was a lot easier. I go there, I get introduced to the table right away, so it was convenient. So some people might feel it's worth paying extra just for the experience.
Right, seeing it that way, you can really see that it becomes a lot less about privilege, and sometimes it's more just about flexibility, offering people options based on their own needs and constraints, which ultimately brings us back to the bigger question of where we draw the line between convenience and fairness. And so we also want to hear about this directly from our viewers. So we ran a poll on the channel asking if popular restaurants introduce a paid fast pass that lets you skip the line, what would you do? And here's what the results showed. So a plurality of respondents, 47%, said they would avoid the service because it feels unfair, while 35% said they would use it to save time, and 18% remained unsure. So this suggests that compared to amusement parks, people are more sensitive to issues of fairness in everyday settings like dining, where the idea of paying to skip the line can feel less acceptable and more like an unnecessary privilege rather than a practical convenience. So let's take this discussion to another space where time and access are even more critical, which are none other than airports. So do fast track services or fast pass services belong in public spaces like airports, Kyun?
Yes, it actually does, especially in airports in countries where many tourists visit, like many countries in Southeast Asia and some countries in Europe as well. Again, it does have its pros and cons that we've talked about today, but the key tension is efficiency against equality. Fairness concern will be an issue, and fast-track system may become problematic if regular lines become intentionally worse to upsell fast-track, and access is purely pay to skip with no operational justification, and if the system undermines the idea of airports as shared public space. So I think it all comes down to, are we going to cater for the minority, the wealthy, people who have just, I guess, more money, and are we going to give them privilege by undermining the majority where people need to just kind of queue up in long lines? Right. So it's a very, it's a controversial, it's very tricky situation. situation as well. But look, if I had the money, I would obviously want to have that kind of advantage of not being able to line up. And like he said, as tourists, time is of the essence. You can't wait in line forever because, at the end of the day, you have to go back to your country and you're actually there to travel, to have fun, and obviously there to spend money. And as a business point of view, you need to make profit. And by selling these kind of, fast track tickets or, giving privilege for people who actually pay extra on top, it does make sense, but we have to look at it from many different perspectives and we'll get different answers depending on where we stand.
I think it's also true what you said earlier about how the setting really matters. When you said,
that as well.
When we talk about children and amusement parks, I was a bit hesitant, but thinking about it as airports, I feel like it's more, you want to be more practical.
Convenient.
If someone's willing to pay more, I'm kind of like, go ahead if you really need it. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on this?
So from another perspective, from maybe a businessman point of view, I guess, it's about efficient allocation of the resources. It's not intended to create controversy or discrimination. The idea behind the system is pretty much it's like fast tracks to simply offer an additional option, allowing people to pay for convenience, mainly to save time, and that additional revenue, like I said, could be reinvested to improve the airport's facilities. So in the end, it can help, like you mentioned, those miners who, having a hard time in the airport, but resource allocation can definitely help running the airports too.
So that does really highlight the core tension in these discussions, whether public services should prioritize equal access for all or adopt market-based approaches to improve efficiency and reinvest in better, perhaps, infrastructure. So before we wrap up, let's take a moment to reflect on today's discussion. So what are your final thoughts on today's topic?
Well, a lot of things are running through my head right now, but because tomorrow's Children's Day, if we look at it from a children's point of view, and if they're, let's say, going to an amusement park tomorrow and they see other kids cut in line and they will ask their parents, Mommy, Daddy, why is that kid not lining up? Why does that kid get to...
I don't want to wait in line.
I don't want to wait in line either. And then it's going to be very difficult for the parents to actually explain why they have to line up like everyone else. And seeing just a few kids, just have faster access. So in terms of the venue, like amusement parks, I guess trying to kind of like not make it too open by selling these fast track tickets might help kids educationally, and then when they grow up, they can experience it much later once they enter the real jungle. But at a young age, seeing that, being exposed to those kind of things, like I said, it's like it might open them to feeling relative deprivation, which is obviously, I felt it before growing up, and it wasn't a great experience, seeing the wealthy, the rich have greater access, more privilege, and it felt like, I didn't want to blame it on my parents, but it did act as a motivation for me, which kind of worked out for the better. But I'm saying...
You're one of the most patient people I know, so I guess it does build character. There's that.
I can wait in line, but I wouldn't choose to wait in line. I would just go to another restaurant, or I wouldn't even pay extra to try that restaurant. So I guess it's not happening everywhere, but if it's happening in amusement parks and it's becoming an issue, I guess everyone can work together to kind of alleviate this thing to become a bigger growing problem.
Right, well said. So what about you? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, again, business point of view, it can be risky and it may reinforce the idea of that money can solve everything, which we do not want to put into children's heads. There are also clear upsides, creates additional value and revenue for businesses and offers convenience for the users as well. So I guess it's all about the balance. Like for a fast track system, it's been introduced slightly more than a decade for a certain amusement park, but they don't do it like every hour. It's normally provided for those who have a yearly membership, like annual membership, for example. That in that case, it sort of makes sense that they get those kind of privilege. So we're likely to see more of these sort of services in the future in many different industries, many different fields, I guess. So it all comes down to one thing: finding the right balance, I guess.
Right. So we talked about amusement parks, restaurants, and airports. So for you personally, you think should be expanded, include those, and also make them more available?
I mean, it's already expanding to different businesses. We started as, for example, amusement park and dining places, but it starts in cafes, and you go into, when you're buying some, for example, home appliances, like the newest gadget, for example, then normally you pay extra to get those in first hand, right?
That is true.
So I'm guessing this will expand in the future. Again, the money comes in to play the game, which is not something that we are looking for, but that's unfortunate truth that we face nowadays.
That is very true. So at the heart of today's discussion is a simple question: should convenience come at the cost of fairness? As fast pass systems expand, finding the right balance will only become more important. So where that line should be drawn is something society will have to decide together. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation. But News Gen will be back on Wednesday at 10:30 a.m. Korea time with more stories and discussions. A big thanks to Kyun.
Thank you for having me.
And also Ki.
Thank you.
And to our viewers, thanks for watching. Hopefully this Children's Day, the only thing you skip is work and not the line. We are
News Generation.
이 김밥 좋아 좋아.
봉화시 최경선
조준호입니다. 반갑습니다.
반갑습니다. 이 김밥 한 줄을 싸기 위해서는 정말 정성과 노력과 시간이 필요합니다. 시금치, 단무지, 당근, 우엉, 햄, 맛살 뭐 이런 게 다 들어가는데 그 하나하나 생으로 넣는 게 아니에요.
바쁠 때 패스트푸드를 먹을 것이냐 김밥을 먹을 것이냐의 선에 딱 쓴다면 김밥을 택할 수밖에 없죠.
빨리 한 끼 때울 수 있고 그래서 김밥은 항상 옆에 있었던 것 같아요.
흘리지 않고.
김밥 종류도 너무 많잖아요. 뭐 참치김밥, 소고기김밥, 뭐 멸치김밥.
먹는 사람 입장에 잘 모르는데 만드는 과정들을 지켜보니까 손이 정말 많이 가죠.
네.
그래서 잘 팔리는 것 같아요. 만들기는 싫고 먹는 건 맛있으니까 김밥 가게들도 많고.
그래서 저는 그 김밥의 매력에 푹 빠져서 현재 김밥 장사를 하고 있습니다.
참기름의 향, 싹 이렇게 입을 감싸는 참기름의 향과 밥의 꾸덕꾸덕함이 믹스가 되면서 아주 그냥 침이 나오는데 꼬다리가 먹고 싶은데 그냥. 근데 제가 듣기로 지금 미국 쪽에서 김밥이 난리가 났다고 들었어요.
아 진짜?
난리가 났어. 그들이 이렇게 굉장히 건강식으로 느껴진대요. 이 바다에서 나온 김과 그 안에 야채들 그리고 밥. 그리고 딱 패키지가 그들은 점심 때 이렇게 나와서 뭐 공원에서도 밥도 많이 먹고 그러기에는 이게 너무 제대로 된 한 끼니까 김밥은 제대로 된 한 끼. 패스트푸드 아닙니다. 그 안에 들어가 있는 하나하나의 재료들이 정성을 싹 밥으로 말아서 기부로 싹 바르면 진짜 든든한 한 끼. 저는 2남 2녀 중에 막내로 자랐는데요. 초등학교 때 그 소풍의 안 겹치기를 우리 형과 막 이렇게 안 겹쳐야 4번을 먹을 수가 있거든요. 김밥을. 엄마는 힘들겠지만 아침마다 싸셔야 되니까. 근데 4명이 자라다 보니까 그 끝에 꼬다리 전쟁이었어요. 꼬다리에 재료가 더 많이 나와 있잖아요. 그래서 지금도 김밥 먹으면 전 꼬다리부터 먹어요.
저는 개인적으로 써는 김밥보다 한 줄 그냥 통으로 뜯어먹는 게 제일 맛있다고 생각합니다. 그냥 말아서 그냥 바로. 근데 좀 잘못 씹으면 또 아싸리 쭉 뽑혀요. 김밥에 가장 잘 어울리는 건 뭐니 해도 떡볶이, 다음 오뎅 국물, 그중에 최고는 뭐예요? 뭐?
모두가 생각하는 라면.
라면이죠.
다 돼 있는 거 아는데도 또 거기서 한 젓가락을 먹어야 돼 이게. 거기서 한 젓가락 딱 먹어봐. 이거든지 다 알아 이제 이미 우린 요리사기 때문에 다 아는데도 한 젓가락 먹고. 라면을 탁 먹으면 촉촉하면서 국물하고 해가지고 입에서 이게 말아서 들어간 건지 따로 먹었는지 모르겠어. 갑자기.
김밥은 옹알스다.
모든 이가 사랑한다.